In the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, the Soviets spoke of a man who turned the shattered city into his hunting ground. They called him a ghost. The Germans called him a nightmare. But history remembers his name. Vasily Zaitsev, the sniper who turned war into a game of patience, shadows, and death. The winter of 1942 clung to Stalingrad like a burial shroud. Snow mixed with ash, drifting through the collapsed skeletons of factories and apartment blocks. The Volga River, once a line of life and movement, now crawled slowly under sheets of ice, choked with debris and the bodies of soldiers who never had the chance to fire a weapon. The city no longer breathed, it whispered, it groaned, it remembered. Vasily Zaitsev arrived here not as a hero, not yet. He came wrapped in a standard-issue greatcoat, boots cracked from the cold, and a rifle slung across his back. Not a sniper's rifle, just a simple Mosin-Nagant 9130 infantry model. A tool. A beginning. He had been a hunter in the Ural Mountains long before he was a soldier. A child of open snowfields and silent valleys, where patience meant survival, and a heartbeat could be the difference between life and starvation. When other boys learned to shout and boast, Zaitsev learned to listen. To wait. To breathe when the world stood still. But the war had changed everything. The Soviet Union was bleeding. Stalingrad had become the symbol of resistance, or of collapse. The Germans believed taking the city would shatter the nation's spirit. The Soviets believed losing it would shatter their soul. Civilians still lived here among the ruins, moving through shattered windows and underground corridors, sharing the same cold hunger as the soldiers who defended them. When Zaitsev stepped off the transport barge onto the western bank of the Volga, the air itself trembled from artillery. The ground shook beneath his boots. The sharp tang of burning oil, metal, and frozen blood filled his lungs. Men were already dying around him, some calling for help, some too silent to call for anything at all. And yet the order was clear. Move forward. Hold the city. No retreat. He was assigned to the 1047th Rifle Regiment, a battered unit holding a line that barely existed anymore. Trenches were not trenches here, they were collapsed stairwells, sewer tunnels, or the shadowed gaps between ruined foundations. Every brick was cover. Every street was death. War in Stalingrad was not fought from a distance. It was fought room to room, floor to floor, breath to breath. But something changed the first time Zaitsev raised a rifle in this city. It happened on the third day. The Germans had taken a machine gun nest in the shell of the tractor factory, pinning down an entire Soviet platoon. Anyone who lifted their head died. The icy wind carried the screams of wounded men who could not be reached. A lieutenant crawled through the rubble toward Vasily. "Comrade," he whispered, voice hoarse from smoke, "you said you used to hunt? Can you shoot?" Vasily didn't answer with words. He just reached for the rifle, calm, steady hands despite the cold. No scope. No marksman's perch. Just iron sights and instinct. He studied the landscape, the broken windows, the collapsed rafters, the jagged concrete. He watched for movement, not shape. Not a man, but the idea of a man. A flicker of shadow where there shouldn't be one. A pause in the rhythm of fire. There. A faint reflection in the periphery of a shattered glass plate. A glint of steel. The eye behind a barrel. He exhaled once, slow, the way he had done 1,000 times in the mountains. The rifle cracked. Not loud. Not violent. Just final. The machine gun went silent. For the first time in days, the Soviet defenders lifted their heads. The lieutenant stared at him. "You are not a soldier," he said quietly. "You are a hunter." And so the whispers began. The city was dying. But in its death, it had awakened something. A ghost in the ruins. A patient shadow. A hunter with frost in his veins and the war in his eyes. Vasily Zaitsev had arrived. Word of the shot traveled faster than the cold wind that cut through the ruins. Not because it was impressive. A single kill meant nothing in the scale of Stalingrad, but because of the calm with which it had been delivered. Men here either died screaming or lived shaking. Nobody moved with composure anymore. Nobody breathed slowly. Nobody felt steady. Except the new arrival from the Urals. The platoon watched him after that. Quietly. Carefully. Not with reverence, but with curiosity. There was something controlled in him. Something still. In a place where everything was chaos and collapse, stillness was a weapon. 3 days later, the opportunity to test that weapon returned. The Germans had begun their push again, block by block, building by building. Snipers were being deployed to break Soviet morale. The Wehrmacht knew what fear did to men. They knew that one bullet placed at the right time could dismantle an entire defensive line. They called it psychological erosion, the slow rot of certainty. And so, one afternoon as the factory smoke thinned and the ash fell like black snow, a Soviet soldier stepped into the open courtyard to retrieve a fallen comrade's map case. The shot came instantly. A crack so sharp it seemed to split the air. The soldier dropped, lifeless before he hit the ground. The platoon pulled back behind cover, shouting warnings, but they did not know where to look. The Germans had hidden their shooter well. The lieutenant found Zaitsev again. "Do you see him?" Vasily scanned the shattered rooftops, his eyes not searching for a shape, but an absence. The small details that betrayed when the environment had been touched. A broken icicle. A shifted slate tile. A patch of frost melted by the warmth of a human cheek pressed to stone. There. A roost. Narrow. A perfect vantage over the courtyard. "He is watching us," Vasily murmured. He crawled forward on his stomach, moving inch by inch across frozen rubble. The cold bit into him, the concrete scraped through his coat, and splinters of brick embedded in the fabric of his sleeves. But he did not rush. Speed served the target, not the hunter. He waited. The sniper fired again, another shot at another soldier foolish enough to peek. The bullet cracked stone not more than a meter from Zaitsev's hand. The timing was right. Vasily did not raise his rifle immediately. Instead, he watched how the German moved after firing, the shift of weight, the angle, the rhythm between breath and trigger. He understood hunters. And this one was careful. Disciplined. A good kill would require patience. He pressed his cheek to the wood of the rifle, lined up his iron sights, and did nothing. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then 5. The German sniper believed his position secure. Mistake 1. He believed the Soviets did not know his location. Mistake 2. He believed he had time. Mistake 3. The wind shifted just slightly, carrying away the smoke from a nearby fire. Vasily saw him. A faint outline. A silhouette against the snow-paled sky. The curve of a helmet. The line of a barrel. And most importantly, the motion of breath. He didn't aim for the head. That was what amateurs aimed for. Heads move. Heads flinch. Heads shift. He aimed for the center of stillness, the place where the body cannot help but steady itself. Just beneath the eye. Just above the cheek. The resting point. One trigger squeeze. No hesitation. No nerves. The shot was silent in his mind. Only the aftermath existed. The silhouette slumped forward, the rifle falling first, then the body, then the quiet. Zaitsev exhaled once, not from relief but from certainty. The lieutenant stared at him again, but this time, there was no curiosity. Only realization. "You need a sniper's rifle," he said. Word reached headquarters within hours. Commanders who had never heard Zaitsev's name now studied it. Men whose strategies controlled thousands of lives now looked toward one man with a hunter's patience and a battlefield made of shadows. The next morning, Vasily was summoned to a command bunker deep beneath the ruined city. Inside, officers stood around a map riddled with pins, markers, and lines that shifted daily, sometimes hourly. The smell of damp wool and stale tobacco filled the air. A candle flickered, struggling against the drafts that slipped through cracks in the concrete. A senior officer gestured toward him. "You are the hunter from the Urals." Zaitsev did not answer. He simply stood. The officer placed a rifle case on the table and opened it. Inside lay a Mosin Nagant 9130 PU sniper rifle, fitted with a 4x PU scope, the weapon that would soon become inseparable from Zaitsev's name. The officer's voice lowered. "This is no longer about holding ground. It is about breaking their will." He stepped closer. "You will not shoot for numbers. You will not shoot for chance. You will hunt their hunters. You will hunt the men who believe they are invisible." Zaitsev nodded once. No vow. No declaration. Just acceptance. The officer leaned forward, his voice a whisper, but one that carried the weight of a city on fire. "Make them fear the ruins they control." And so, the ghost of Stalingrad was armed. The war did not change. But the balance within it did. They sent him to the rooftops first. Not the high ones. Those were death traps already watched by German spotters, but the mid-level terraces where shattered chimneys and fractured walls created pockets of concealment. Stalingrad was no city anymore. It was a labyrinth of broken edges, burned scars, and frozen echoes. The Volga groaned in the distance, moving like a wounded animal beneath the ice. Artillery rumbled without pause. Buildings collapsed in the far blocks like dying breaths. Smoke never rose. It only hung, heavy, unmoving, trapped between sky and ruin. This was the world of the sniper now. Vasily lay with his rifle cradled into his shoulder, watching the ruins ahead. He did not look for Germans. He looked for mistakes: fabric brushing against brick, a reflection of glass, the sudden stiff posture of a man trying not to be seen. These things told more than movement ever could. Hours passed. Snow gathered in his hair, on his lashes, across the barrel of the rifle. He did not brush it away. The snow was camouflage. The cold was patience. The discomfort was irrelevant. Eventually he spotted them, 2 Germans crawling through rubble toward a sniper perch of their own. They moved with discipline. They were not infantry. They were hunters. The kind of men the Germans sent when they wanted to teach a lesson. Vasily did not shoot. Not yet. He watched how they communicated, small signals, barely perceptible nods. One took position, the other slipped farther back to spot. A 2-man sniper cell. Clever. Dangerous. He followed the spotter first. The man scanned the ruins carefully, studying angles with a veteran's precision. He would be the more experienced of the 2. If eliminated, the shooter would be blind, vulnerable. Zaitsev inhaled slowly through his nose. Held the breath. Waited. He exhaled halfway, not fully. A half-empty lung steadies the body, quiets the heartbeat. It lets the world slow. The spotter leaned up, just enough for the slightest silhouette. Vasily squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck cleanly. The man fell backward without a sound. The shooter froze. Not out of fear but calculation. A professional response. Good. This one would test him. The German did not panic. He did not retreat. He did not expose himself. Instead, he shifted deeper into shadow, the barrel of his rifle withdrawing into a crevice so narrow it could barely be seen. A duel without words began. Zaitsev shifted position, very slowly, inch by inch. A sniper never stays where he fires. A second shot from the same angle is an invitation to death. He slid behind a broken ventilation pipe, then angled the rifle around the shattered frame of a stairwell window. Minutes passed. Then half an hour. Then longer. The German did not move, but Vasily knew he was there, watching, waiting, calculating in the same silence. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a predator. Vasily allowed the cold to still his hands, to silence everything except sight and breath. Then, movement. Barely a shadow. Just enough. He fired. The German fell forward, his weapon clattering onto stone before his body slid halfway out of the crevice. Blood marked the dust. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just final. 2 hunters, gone. But Stalingrad did not applaud. Stalingrad did not notice. The city consumed victories the same way it consumed bodies, quietly, without ceremony. Zaitsev crawled back through the rubble toward Soviet lines. As he moved, he passed soldiers huddled around barrel fires, their faces gaunt, eyes hollow from hunger and fear. They barely registered him. A sniper's work was invisible to most. Only those who understood silence recognized its weight. When he returned to the bunker headquarters, the same senior officer looked up at him, not in surprise but in confirmation. "You have begun," he said simply. There were no congratulations. Just a list. Names. Ranks. Units. German snipers known to operate along the front. Men whose kills left patterns. Men who hunted not for sport but for purpose. Zaitsev read the list like one reads weather reports. Then he lifted his eyes. "These are not soldiers," he said quietly. "These are hunters." The officer's reply was equally quiet. "And you are now the counter-hunter." Zaitsev nodded once and left. He did not ask for recognition. But word still spread. Not as rumor. Not as myth. But as something whispered between men who desperately needed something to believe in. There is someone killing the killers. Soon, Soviet infantry began marking sight lines for him. Scouts reported sniper nests before engaging. Soldiers who had once crouched in fear behind stone now waited, knowing that somewhere, unseen, a man with a hunter's patience was watching over them. The Germans noticed too. Units began moving slower. Helmets dipped lower. Bodies hugged walls more tightly. And a name began circulating among them, spoken with a mixture of irritation and caution. Asterisk, Der Geist. Asterisk, the ghost. A hunter who could not be seen. A silhouette who fired without warning. A presence felt but never confirmed. But ghosts do not remain unchallenged. And the Germans did not respond with rumors. They responded with a man. Not just any sniper, but one of their best. A mentor of sharpshooters. An instructor from the elite sniper school in Berlin. A hunter who had studied the psychology of men like Zaitsev. Major Erwin Koenig. A man who believed that war was not chaos, but mathematics. He did not come to Stalingrad to shoot soldiers. He came to kill the ghost. The duel was no longer accidental. It had become inevitable. They said Koenig arrived quietly. No banners. No special convoy. Just a man stepping off a transport truck with a long rifle case and a calmness that unsettled even German officers hardened by the siege. He was not there to rally troops, nor to take command of a sector. He came for a single purpose. One name. One ghost. Zaitsev did not hear Koenig's name from command. He heard it the way rumors travel when death is close, through silence. A wounded scout, barely conscious, whispered of a German sniper whose shot came from nowhere. A shot that seemed to see not just targets but thoughts. A shot that predicted fear. A hunter has come, the scout breathed before the morphine finally pulled him under. And Zaitsev understood. War has rules, but the duel of snipers has none. For days the city became a chessboard. Every window, every collapsed column, every crater in frozen earth, each was a square where one misstep meant death. Koenig moved with the patience of a man who had studied death all his life. He did not take reckless shots. He did not taunt. He removed targets as if erasing numbers from an equation. 3 Soviet snipers fell in the first morning. 2 more by evening. They died without ever seeing where the bullet came from. Zaitsev studied the pattern. The angles. The timing. Koenig was not just skilled, he was disciplined to a frightening degree. He did not shift his nest after every shot. He shifted before. He anticipated the anticipation. A hunter who could feel the hunt. So Zaitsev waited. He waited inside the skeleton of a bombed-out factory, among twisted beams and shattered concrete. The air smelled of rust and ash. Burns from old fires still marked the walls like shadows of flames long gone. He lay beside a comrade, Nikolai Kulikov, one of his most trusted spotters. Hours passed. A faint trickle of snow drifted through holes in the roof like white dust floating through captured sunlight. Zaitsev scanned the ruins, and then he saw it. Not movement. Not a glint. Something smaller. A piece of metal, just a tiny bit too clean, set in the rubble of a broken machine. Not placed. Positioned. Deliberate. A decoy. Koenig wanted him to see it. Zaitsev did not take the shot. He whispered to Kulikov, barely parting his lips. "He's beneath," Zaitsev murmured, "not above." A lesser sniper might have fired. Koenig was counting on that. But Zaitsev wasn't hunting a man with a rifle. He was hunting a mind. And Koenig's mind was razor-sharp. The day stretched. The cold stiffened their fingers. Hunger gnawed. But patience was a weapon. Finally, movement. A single small shift of rubble, barely visible to the untrained eye. Zaitsev's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. No rush. No breath. Just stillness. He aimed not where Koenig was, but where a professional would adjust. Just a hair, just a moment, when preparing to fire. He waited for the inhale. The smallest rise of shadow. A heartbeat in the snow. Zaitsev fired. The shot echoed through stone corridors and hollow streets. The silence afterward was a kind of release, like the city exhaled. Then a figure slumped forward from behind the iron sheet that concealed him. A gloved hand dropped first. Then the rifle. Then the body. Koenig fell without theatrics. Death does not require dramatics. Zaitsev and Kulikov approached cautiously, weaving through broken concrete and jagged steel. The ruins felt quieter. Not safer, just quieter, as if something old and heavy had finally stopped breathing. They found Koenig lying on his side, eyes half open, still aware. Not afraid. Not angry. Simply acknowledging. 2 predators recognizing the end of the hunt. Zaitsev did not speak. Koenig did. His voice was faint, ragged with cold and impact. "You were never a ghost," Koenig whispered. "Just patient." Zaitsev bowed his head, not out of respect for the enemy's uniform, but for a hunter who had understood the silence of the rifle. Koenig's last breath left him like a quiet sigh. Zaitsev took nothing from the body except the rifle. Not as a trophy. As a memory of the duel that had defined 2 men shaped by war. When Zaitsev returned to Soviet lines, no cheers greeted him. No songs. No speeches. Stalingrad did not celebrate survival. It merely endured. But word traveled anyway. Not shouted. Not printed. Whispered. The ghost still hunts. And across the shattered city, soldiers, starving, exhausted, frozen, felt something shift. Not victory. Not hope. But belief. That even in ruin, even in starvation, even in death, there are still men who fight the dark. Vasily Zaitsev continued to walk among the rubble, not as a legend, not as a hero, but as a man with a rifle who understood what silence required. War would end one day, but the duel of hunters would be remembered. not because of how many died, but because of how one ghost was seen. Stalingrad, winter 1942 to 1943. The city no longer resembled a place where life could exist. It looked like a broken skeleton, shattered buildings, collapsed factories, and entire districts turned into fields of rubble. The air hung thick with smoke that seemed permanent, settling inside lungs and clothing. Nothing in Stalingrad was silent. Even in the rare moments when no shots rang out, one could still hear the distant groaning of twisted metal cooling under the frost, or the whisper of wind pushing ash across the ruined streets. Vasily Zaitsev had been in this hell for weeks, and yet, he moved through it with the clarity of a man who had accepted his purpose. He no longer thought about the world beyond these ruins. Life had become small and focused. Find the enemy, eliminate the enemy, protect the men beside you. He had already earned a reputation among the Soviet troops. Whispered accounts passed from trench to trench. The sniper from the Urals who struck without missing, who knew how to wait without moving, whose eyes were said to measure distance the way a carpenter measured wood. Some exaggerated his abilities. Some believed he was lucky. Vasily knew it was neither. It was training. It was patience. It was memory and experience honed on the mountains of Siberia long before the war. But as much as his presence lifted Soviet morale, it had begun to damage German morale just as effectively. German infantry moved differently now, nervous, hurried, seeking cover where they had once walked confidently. Officers discouraged grouping. Helmets dipped lower. Conversations became whispers. The invisible hunter was always there. It was only a matter of time before the Germans attempted to eliminate him. The arrival of Major Erwin Koenig, historically debated. The German response was not random. Their intelligence knew Zaitsev by name. His confirmed kills, recorded and reported by Soviet propaganda outlets, were no secret. The Wehrmacht command wanted him gone, not only to protect their soldiers, but to counter the psychological weight of his reputation. A sniper can kill a dozen men. A legend can cripple an army's confidence. So the Germans sent one of their own, a master sniper from the sniper school in Berlin, often referred to as Major Erwin Koenig or sometimes Heinz Thorvald. The historical accuracy of his existence is still debated. Some Soviet accounts record him clearly, German archives remain silent or lost. But the story, preserved through first-hand Soviet testimony, forms a narrative that has become inseparable from Zaitsev's legacy. Whether Koenig existed by name or another identity, what matters is that a German counter-sniper was sent with one objective: kill Vasily Zaitsev. From the moment Zaitsev learned this, the conflict shifted. This was no longer war dispersed across ruined districts. This became a duel, two men separated by rubble and cold steel sight lines. Everything slowed. Everything became personal. The hunt begins. Sniper duels were measured not in minutes but in days. Patience was the primary weapon. Each movement, breath, and decision carried weight. The duel began when Soviet scouting units reported consistent, precise sniper fire from a destroyed industrial sector near the factory district. A pattern. A signature. It lacked the hurried impatience of an average German marksman. It was careful, deliberate, deadly. Zaitsev recognized the enemy's skill through the kills. They are not random shots, he told his comrades. He chooses targets of importance. He waits. He observes. He is like me. With him for support was his spotter, Nikolai Kulikov, a disciplined and sharp-eyed soldier who had fought beside Zaitsev since his earliest days in Stalingrad. Kulikov knew Zaitsev's patterns, rhythms, and scanned differently than other men. Together they had become a quiet, lethal team. The battlefield was the twisted remains of a steelworks facility. Debris lay everywhere, broken beams, crushed tanks, half-collapsed walls that created channels of shadow and kill zones. The duel played out as a chess match in silence. Zaitsev and Kulikov concealed themselves carefully. The enemy did the same. Hours passed. Snow fell. Breath condensed into faint clouds. Nothing moved. A duel like this is not about seeing the enemy. It is about forcing the enemy to reveal himself. A decoy and a mistake. Both sides used decoys, helmets raised on sticks, reflective surfaces positioned to mislead. A sniper never fired twice from the same position. Never exhaled too loudly. Never shifted weight unless necessary. The German sniper struck first. One shot. Play. A Soviet soldier attempting to adjust a position fell instantly. No warning. No sound before. Only the crack of the rifle. The shot was too precise. Too controlled. Zaitsev knew instantly, this was him. The real duel had begun. For 2 days they watched each other without seeing each other. Thousands of men fought around them. But for Zaitsev there was only one enemy. And for Koenig there was only one target: identifying the Germans' position. The breakthrough came not from sight but from logic. Zaitsev began eliminating possible shooting positions one by one. Angles, elevation, shadow, reflection of light, he calculated them silently. There was one location that matched all needed criteria: a damaged sheet of metal covering a firing slit in a destroyed machine shop. The glint of glass, barely perceptible but real, reflected sunlight for just a second. It was enough. "That's him," Zaitsev whispered. But there was still a problem. Approaching the position would expose them to a fatal shot. They needed the German to fire first, to reveal his barrel. So Kulikov acted as bait. He moved as if adjusting equipment, making his presence known while controlling every gesture to avoid signaling intention. The German took the shot. But Kulikov had anticipated the timing. He dropped instantly, allowing the bullet to strike harmlessly into a brick fragment. The muzzle flash gave Koenig away. Zaitsev now had the exact firing angle. The killing shot. Zaitsev adjusted his position slowly, millimeter by millimeter, until the barrel of Koenig's rifle aligned with his sight. Zaitsev didn't aim for the rifle. He aimed for the darkness just beyond it, the space where a man's eye must be. He exhaled. He waited. He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed softly, muted by rubble and snow. There was no cry, no dramatic collapse. Only stillness. The duel was over. Kulikov crawled forward cautiously. When they reached the position, they found the German's rifle, the scope fractured, the bullet having entered through the lens and into the skull behind it. A clean kill. The kind that only comes from experience and absolute calm. Aftermath and legacy. The duel became legend. Soviet propaganda amplified it. German soldiers whispered about it in fear. Historians still debate its authenticity. But the psychological effect was real. Zaitsev continued to fight until he was severely wounded later in the war. He would survive the injury, recover, and return to duty. After the war, he lived quietly, working as a factory director, his fame known but his demeanor unchanged. He did not consider himself a hero. He considered himself a soldier who had done what was required. His rifle, the Mosin E Nagant Model 1891-30, is still preserved in the Stalingrad Museum. The city where he fought still stands. And the legend of Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev remains one of the most iconic accounts of sniper warfare in modern history.